All right, welcome to Real Estate Hustlers Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Appleman, founder and CEO of Appleman Capital. Today we're joined with Kevin Gardner. Kevin is the president of Multifamily Utility Solutions with 20 years at Comcast. Kevin has expertly boosted NOI by $4 million and asset values by $100 million in 2023. He's also an author of Change Your Thinking, Ignite Your Life, revealing the success secrets of positive self-talk. Kevin, we appreciate you coming on the show today. If you could let the listeners know a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. I appreciate it. Well, you touched on some of those things, but I started my career in the cable and the internet business, although internet wasn't really around when I started my career with Comcast. And then I had a successful career there and grew with them as they grew. And then at a certain point, I missed that entrepreneurial piece of the business, so I started my own company. Our first clients were what's now Spectrum and Comcast Xfinity, and we represented them and we negotiated on their behalf with apartment, mobile home community owners and their property management companies to get agreements to provide service to the residents. And then over time, they ended up taking that work in-house and we were kind of left odd man out. And so what we did at that point is, since we're sitting at the negotiating table anyhow, we just slid to the other side and we started representing, in 2012, we started representing property owners and their management companies in those negotiations with the cable and the internet companies.
Got it. And that's one of a huge add-on is when you can actually add on internet services to your complex and help provide a different service to the tenants plus additional revenue line. Is that right?
It is, and there's a couple of different options, and it really comes down to each property. As you're doing your due diligence on properties, each property is different, right? You got to look at it different, and each one brings different things is unique, right? So what we do is we do the same thing with our clients. We find out what their goals are, because there's a couple of different ways you could use the cable and the internet to generate revenue. Now, one is if you provide it as an amenity. That's called bulk contracts, where you basically buy it at a reduced rate and then you charge your residents a premium over what you're paying and you make the difference on that. So that's what's really comes down to, you got to look at that like you would any other amenity. What's it going to cost me? Am I going to be able to realize the benefit of that in my rent? So that's one way we can do that. We see that as more something that A-class and larger properties in certain markets kind of trend towards. It's not something that's absolutely a slam dunk for everybody. The other way you can do it is just through helping the cable companies, the internet companies, market their services to your residents. Somebody new moves in to one of your properties and you're like, hey, Spectrum is our preferred provider of choice, and you give them preferential marketing rights. And by doing that, you get a percentage of the revenue that they generate. So it's lower reward, but it's also much lower risk. You're not coming out of pocket. In that situation, it's all revenue. In the other situation, you could make more on it, but you are then having a fixed expense that becomes part of your expense line items on a monthly basis. So it just depends on which way you're most comfortable.
Got it. So if we had cable company come in and we were going to sign up for the contract on a 70-unit multifamily portfolio, we would be paying for all the 70 units every single month, whether the tenants were paying or not. So it's our job then to sell it back to the tenants, hopefully at lease signing or midstream. Is that right?
Correct. Most of the time, what you either use it as an additional line item or you bake it into your rent so that you can then promote, hey, instead of $800, we're now $850, but it includes your internet service. So it's like any other amenity. When you go and you start looking at it, not everybody, let's say you don't have a pool, right? And you're going to sit there and considering, I'm going to put a pool in. Am I going to be able to pay back that investment? Am I going to be able to charge more in rent? How am I going to make that investment back? Is it going to increase my occupancy? And the same thing is true like this. I encourage everybody that's considering one of these bulk agreements, look at it the same as you would if you were going to put in a fitness center or a pool. Are you going to be able to pay yourself back and make more money by adding that amenity?
Yeah, and I know that we were considering it on a couple properties. What would be the tenant demographic that that would be most successful if you're not baking it into the rents? Is that your bigger, larger properties, B class, A class, or what are your thoughts?
Definitely more so on what we have found, and each property is different, but A-class properties, the residents tend to be less worried. I mean, everybody's worried about how much they pay for rent, right? But they're looking at it more like, what do they get for that amount, right? What are the amenities? Maybe a workout facility is important for them. Maybe a pool is important to them, and maybe internet's important that it's included. We find that the C's and some of the lower B's are more price sensitive and not focused necessarily as much on what they get, but what's my rent? I'm on a fixed income, I need to worry about just my rent. And in those cases, we don't see many C-class properties doing bulk because of that, because they've let's face it, at the end of the day, anything I do, if it hurts your occupancy because you price yourself out, I can't make up enough revenue for you to, incur a 10% reduction in your occupancy, right? I mean, occupancy is king. Well, paying occupancy is king, right?
Yeah, that's for sure. And that was what hinged us, was bringing on a totally different line item as an expense, and then hopefully you sell it on the lease renewals or the leases, or even selling it back to the tenants. But there's a lot of other resources out there for even free internet, what we found out. So it's kind of, you're competing against what other players are out there to where the tenants can achieve the same thing for less money. And that comes down to the demographic and your property asset class too.
Well, yes, and it also comes down to what are your long-term goals, right? So that's the other thing we want to find out. Is this a buy and hold property, or is this a buy, a syndication where you're going to have to pay back money in the next few years, and you're looking to take it from a B to an A or a C to a B, and you're looking to get out, right? Because a bulk agreement, typically you can't get out of it, right? If you do a bulk agreement with one of the providers, you're really kind of stuck, because they prefer that. That's their preferred way, because it's one bill. They're not running as many trucks out there. They get to count everybody in there as a paying customer. That's their preference, right? So they're not going to let you out of the agreement that is the one they desire. If you do one of the revenue share agreements and you come back to them and say, you know what, we'd rather go to bulk, they will let you, because you're moving from one that they like, but it's not the top on their list, to their most preferred one. So that's the other thing, is if you're not going to stick there and you don't know that, what if you could put the property on the market in 3 years and you're stuck with bulk, and one of the potential buyers says, ooh, not a big fan of bulk, don't like it, would rather have the residents choose their own, or it doesn't make sense for me, you're stuck. If you've got a revenue share agreement, and then all of a sudden, they say, oh, well, I want bulk, then they can move it to bulk. So those are things we want to find out as much as possible about your goals, your property, your market, and those types of things before we make any recommendations.
Got it. Yeah. And bulk, I mean, those are typically 10-year contracts?
Bulk is not. Bulk can be anywhere from 3 to 5 to 6. The revenue share tends to be more at the 10 level, but because you can convert it to bulk, you've got some flexibility. Most bulk is, I've seen them as low as 3, typical is 5.
What's been a situation or a scenario that came up where somebody got into a bulk contract and it may have has hindered the sale? Have you seen that in your career?
I don't know if I've seen it hinder the sale. I do. Well, you know what? I do know that I had somebody that was as a client of mine that doesn't like bulk, and they were looking at a bulk property, and they were asking me to see if there was any way to help get them out of that agreement. So I have seen that be the case. I've also recently helped a client who understood all the different options and wanted to do bulk. And then 6 months later, they came back and they said, we don't like this. Can we get out? And I had to reinforce them that no, that was one of the cautions that we had was it's once you're in with bulk.
Got it. And they didn't like, what was the reason that they didn't like it? Because every place has different scenarios, I'm sure.
Yeah, because at that point they were having to raise their rents. They went then from every new resident, they would have to, I think they had tried to market to add $75 per unit because they were paying about $40 for their internet service, 40 to 45. So they were trying to get 75 more, and they were getting some pushback from potential residents that were saying, no, I that's not that important. And so they kind of thought they were going to do themselves some good by being able to offer the amenity, but in some ways they've kind of priced themselves a little bit higher than the market would warrant compared to some of their competitors.
Got it. That's I think even a good due diligence point, maybe you send out a mass email to the community and kind of get to see what how receptive they are, and just a survey just to see if anyone would sign up, and that could be a good indicator.
That is, we also get information from the providers oftentimes that will tell us what percentage of the units already have service, and kind of what kind of revenue is being generated. So yeah, absolutely. Don't jump into it. Do your due diligence and understand, your property. The other thing to be aware of is, we've had clients that have bought properties and they're going to go in, they're going to eventually renovate every single unit. Well, if you're having to pay for all units and you've got some that are, if you're going to run an occupancy of about 75 to 80% for a couple of years as you renovate those, my recommendation would be if you want to do bulk, wait until your renovations are done so that you have more, a higher occupancy rate. Because let's face it, if you had $40 per unit that you're paying, and you've only got 80% of the units full, you're by default paying closer to $50.
Yeah, or you're just basically paying just for the bill that's coming in and really making no gains, but you've got another bill to service. What are the downsides to shared revenue model?
Well, like the downside really is that while it's lower risk, it could potentially be lower reward, right? So what you get for revenue share is less than what you would get for bulk if bulk works perfectly, right? So if you've got 100% occupied and you can get an extra $25 per month for each of those units, you're going to make much more from that than you will from revenue share.
Got it. Yes,
so the upside is greater. Yeah, the upside is greater if it's working as it's designed to work.
Yeah, and it should just be extra income coming in, just kind of on cruise control, and you're just allowing a provider to come in as preferred status, and they've essentially got more markets that they can exclusively have to market to, in a sense. I mean, there's no one's tied down to the service, but it gives marketing rights, I guess. Is that right?
Right. Exactly.
Got it. What's the biggest challenges that you faced with negotiations between, say, property owner and then the service provider?
I think part of it is expectations, right? Everybody always wants more on both sides, and we're trying to bring the parties together. That's one of the challenges. Smaller properties, typically they don't get as much. It's just like anything else, right? It's leverage. And you've got a lot more leverage if you've got a 200 unit property than if you've got a 40 unit property. So, we've had some where they've had a 200 unit property and then they want the same deal for their 20 unit property, which, many times we can't get.
Got it. That makes sense. Share a story, or I guess a use case to where you were able to increase the NOI on a property.
Well, every time we do a contract where there was no contract previously, it's an increase in NOI. So, whether it be bulk or whether it be, revenue share. The other thing we do is once we have a client, so typically what happens is a new client gives us a list of all their properties in their portfolio. And then we determine whether or not there's an agreement in place or not. And if there is one already that they may not be aware of, for some reason you buy a property, and sometimes because the property sold so many times, the cable companies have sold so many times, somewhere along the line, somebody lost sight of this. Maybe the revenue share, maybe it's a revenue share agreement. We run into this often, the revenue share agreement, and the payments are still going to an old owner. So we help them get those things in alignment immediately. So that's one way we help. The other thing is that we plug these into a database, and our database spits out a monthly report that says these are coming up for renewal. And even if it's a 10-year agreement for revenue share, let's say, and the owner's happy with that and they want to keep going, one of the things we can do is, instead of letting it go to an auto renew period, we can go back and we can ask for a renewal of another 10-year period. And in that case, what happens is they get an additional door fee. So the door fee is what's given to them as a one-time upfront payment, as almost as an incentive to enter into the agreement. And then the revenue share is paid out usually quarterly. So if we let it go to auto renew, there's no additional door fee paid. So by keeping track of all these things and helping manage this for our clients, we can get them a second door fee at the 10-year mark while the revenue share continues. Now, granted, they lock in for another 10 years, but if they were satisfied with the way the last 10 have gone, why not enter into it and get another door fee, another lump sum payment? So that's another way that this is top of mind because we've got a really good client in the Carolinas, and we're right now in the process of renewing their contracts, their revenue share contracts, on about 6 of their properties. And as a result, they're going to get several $100,000 that they wouldn't have otherwise gotten.
Nice. That's a hell of a bonus.
Yeah. And it's all because we try and stay up on this type of things.
Yeah, for sure. What else have you done or are aware of that can help increase the NOI and produce different revenue channels?
Yeah, so we talk about the internet contracts primarily because that's the one we do hands-on. That's what we do in-house. We also, over time, have developed relationships with others in the utility space that specialize in others. So we specialize in this. We also have a partner that specializes in trash contracts. We have another partner who specializes in electric and gas contracts. We have another partner who specializes in water conservation through a proprietary patented valve that they have access to that can be installed to reduce your water bills.
Wow.
So there's a lot of different things. And again, it comes down to each property. Like, for example, this water valve, right? If you have a water meter that serves 4 units only, it's not going to make sense to put this water valve in because you need 1 per meter. If you've got 1 meter that serves 20 units, then it's probably the payback is going to probably make sense. We have a partner that specializes in solar, that knows the solar business inside and out. So there's a lot of different partnerships, and it really comes down to each property's a little different. For example, I just gave you the example of the water valve and where it might make sense versus where it doesn't. Electric and gas is only available for competitive pricing in certain deregulated markets, right? So I live in Northeast Ohio. We are a deregulated market. West Virginia, Tennessee, not deregulated. So if you have an apartment property in Northeast Ohio, you've got an opportunity to get a competitive bid for your electric and your gas. If you're in West Virginia or Tennessee, you don't. So when we get a new client, we usually take care of the internet and the cable contracts first. And then we look at their, what size are they? How many buildings do they have, and a lot of other factors. And then we make some recommendations, or in some cases they ask us specifically, like, what can we do about this? This line item looks very high to us. What can we do about it? So we work with them on those sorts of things. And then we put them in contact with our preferred partners that specialize in those things. So, instead of trying to do everything, we try and do one thing really well, and we partner with other people who try and do one thing really well.
What does that water valve do? Besides, I guess it holds back water, obviously, from coming in, but it regulates it.
Yeah, so it's called a flow saver valve, and what it does is it's placed on the property side of the meter, and as the water flows through there, there's a certain amount of water and gas that is in there. So it's not pure water that's flowing through there. This valve takes that water and the gas out, and instead of passing that along for usage, it only passes along pure water. And as a result, it reduces your actual usage by about anywhere between 10 and 15%. So that's another one. And we pride ourselves, we do free assessment, right? You come to us and you want to see what we can do for you. All we ask is that you give us a list of your portfolio, your properties. And then we'll come back and say, hey, Josh, here's what we can do for your properties. The same is true for Flow Saver. They've got a form that you fill out, and they come back and they say, look, here's the model. Here's what it looks like. Here's what the savings would look like. And they offer two different things. They offer a shared savings model where you pay them back over a 3 to 5 year period based on shared savings, or you can just buy the valve outright. And it just depends on what your business model is and whether you want to have that ongoing expense or whether you want to have the capital and invest in it, at that level. So, and again, we like to deal with people who are willing to do a free assessment. We don't charge for site surveys. We don't charge for, retainer. We don't charge for anything. In fact, our compensation is only based on what we generate for you. We're 100% commission. We don't charge hourly. We don't charge retainer, anything like that. We'll do all this work. We'll give you the data. And then if we do a contract that results in you getting compensation, you pay us a percentage of that after you get paid. And since it's a percentage, our goal is the same as yours. Make as much as possible, right? Because we're going to get a percentage of that. And the more we make for you, the more we make for us, because it's based on a straight percentage.
Yeah, that's balance. That's an alignment of interest. Everyone wins, and that's how true business should go, for sure. Not one wins and the other feel like they got taken. But no, I like that model. I like what you're doing, for sure.
We want to be your business partner. We want to develop a long-term relationship with you. I'm not worried about a short-term check. I'd rather have a long-term relationship.
Yeah, as the firm keeps growing and purchasing more properties, just like you get a cost segregation study done, you call up Kevin. Kevin, hey, I got another property. Kevin comes in and sees what negotiations can be done on the utility savings. That's huge.
Yeah.
As part of the asset management and increasing the value of the property and along with it, business plan. I like it. Is there anything that you can give to the audience that they can implement today, right now, maybe look at and take immediate value from?
Well, I mean, I'd say take advantage of our free assessment, right? I mean, because
Yeah.
there's no cost to you. All you do is send us a list of properties, and we come back and say, here's what we can do, or guess what, there's no opportunity. Or we may find that you've already got a contract in place, but the revenue is going to somebody else, a former owner, in which case we will help you get that fixed, and there is no cost for that because we didn't do that contract, but we're going to help you again because we want to develop that long-term relationship. So if you're our client and we do one contract for you, we help you with all your other properties regardless of whether we did the contract or not, because like I was mentioning earlier, when those contracts come up for renewal, hopefully that's when we'll get paid by helping you take care of them now.
Love it. Kevin, you've definitely enlightened me with different things. And it would almost be foolish for a multifamily operator not to call you up, not to say, hey, here's the properties. What can you do for me? Because you're literally working to save the property on expenses and boost the value through NOI increase. So I love it. I absolutely love it. Any closing remarks?
No, I would just encourage people, because I know sometimes in due diligence, you think all the contracts are there. And I'm not saying anybody hides them intentionally, but I am saying that through the years, depending on how old the property is that you're looking at, sometimes these things get lost unintentionally. So I would tell you that it's never too early to engage us, because even if you're looking at a property and you want to know, hey, we didn't see any contract, but can you kind of poke around and see if there is, we're happy to help.
Yeah. Very cool. Kevin, definitely appreciate your time today. Definitely appreciate the enlightenment on utility savings. Look forward to following you, and we will certainly talk soon.
Thanks, Josh. I appreciate the time today.